The following is a keynote speaker presentation from the ACM 97 conference, The Next 50 Years of Computing. ACM 97 brought together over 2,000 leaders and luminaries from all aspects of the computing world to discuss and predict what the next 50 years of computing has in store. ACM 97 underwriters were Computer World, Hewlett-Packard, Intel, Microsoft, and Sun Microsystems. Sponsors were Cadmus Journal Services, IBM, Netscape, Popular Science, Sheridan Printing Company Incorporated, Silicon Graphics Incorporated, SoftBank, and Unisys. The event also included a major exposition with a paleotechnic look back to the future from the year 2047, and a specially commissioned book, Beyond Calculation, featuring essays on the next 50 years of computing by luminaries and pioneers in the field. The ACM 97 conference was chaired by Robert Metcalf and emceed by James Burke. Details on how to obtain more information on ACM 97 follow this program.
Ladies and gentlemen, James Burke.
Our first speaker is just what you need after whatever it was you got up to last night, because if anything's going to rattle your cage, he will. His official biography describes him as an author, journalist, editor, and critic. I think you could also call him somebody who has no time at all for people who take themselves too seriously. So watch out. He wrote The Hacker Crackdown, a study of electronic crime and civil liberties that led to the setting up of the Electronic Frontier Foundation in 1990. He edited Mirror Shades, the definitive document of the cyberpunk movement. He writes a pop science column for the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and a critics column for Science Fiction Eye. He's also written 7 novels, the most recent of which, Holy Fire, is absolutely great. If you haven't read it, rush out and get a copy, but wait till this conference finishes. He's on the board of directors of the Electronic Frontier Foundation in Austin, and he serves on the police liaison committee of the local Electronics Civil Liberties Group, if anything electronic can be said to be local. Public speaking is one of his hobbies, and he's done it on ABC, CBC, BBC, MTV, and many other less stuffed shirt places where you do such things. He's appeared in a large amount of magazines and among groups too numerous to mention. And when I tell you that his suggestion for what we might do with those little polling paddles we've been using, he said, try the Mexican wave. So you get a feel for what's coming. Ladies and gentlemen, here to talk about matters so mind-boggling, and you'd better hope he's wrong, that I feel I should just shut up and sit down, is Bruce Sterling.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I do feel very privileged, ladies and gentlemen, to be a science fiction writer at this event. This has been a real circus. I've been lucky enough to live in the late 20th century during the digital revolution, and I do consider that a great piece of historical good fortune. As 20th century technical revolutions go, I do believe this is the best one ever. The computer revolution has been a very sweet, civilized, and kindly revolution, almost a velvet revolution. You know, I admit that my favorite revolution hasn't been without its dark and damp and sticky areas, but look at the competition. The radio revolution was supposed to abolish borders and unite the world. But after 50 years of radio, Hitler and Goebbels were making horrible use of radio. And visionaries also assured us that air travel would abolish borders and unite the world. But 50 years after the Wright brothers, the sky was full of armed bombers. And as for rockets and nuclear weapons, well, it's been 50 years there too, and yet we've somehow never thrown nuclear rockets across our borders to destroy the world. Atomic Armageddon was always vaporware hype. It never launched. It never became a real product. Just consider that wonderful fact, ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasure it is to put the future behind us. However, it would appear that cyberspace really is abolishing borders and uniting the world in its own subtle, halting, geeky, otherworldly fashion. And we have to scratch our heads now and try to imagine what this weird fulfillment of our dreams might really mean. Well, a wise and cynical minority have always expected this revolution to be every bit as awful as the other ones, maybe even much, much worse. Now, way back in 1948, the dawn of time, as we all know, there was George Orwell's compelling vision of total technical surveillance. Big Brother downloading a boot into your face forever. Now, Orwell was very foresightful, for something very similar is clearly happening today, but with the important distinction that we're all Big Brother now. It's not the secret police in the memory hole who control the web. The web grows like bread mold. It's all over the place. If anybody's in trouble from constant malignant surveillance, it's not the oppressed masses. Who cares about them? Instead, the lacerating pressure of surveillance is on our society's famous people. The real sufferers are the pop stars, the royal families, the sports idols, and of course, our politicians. These poor things. Their divorces and drug habits are pitilessly exposed. Their mistresses and boyfriends appear on cable talk shows. Their personal finances are gone over with fine-toothed combs, and they never know when they'll be caught on tape or on camera. It's enough to try the patience of a saint, and I think it can only get worse. Now, pop culture historians may remember another terrifying computer scenario. The central gimmick of Colossus, the Forbin project, I certainly know that Brenda Laurel remembers this. This is a malignant, centralized superbrain that knows everything, comes awake with evil plans to exterminate humanity and to fold, spindle, and mutilate our souls. Well, to no one's particular surprise, we do indeed have a single, giant, world-spanning, cybernetic super system now. But instead of a reel-to-reel mainframe of gloating punch card menace, it's a touchingly scatterbrained and dotty old thing. Instead of threatening us in a grating monotone, it generally says things like, URL not found on this server. Today, the darkest and scariest computer menace scenarios are about information warfare. Information warfare. The very term gives you a shudder, doesn't it? You know, as a veteran of the 20th century who knows a little bit about traditional, no-kidding warfare, I find information warfare to be a rather pale and unconvincing virtuality. You know, if they somehow throw a war and nobody gets bombed or shot, most of us will turn to the sports pages. So the computer revolution has been kinder and gentler than we might have expected, and one wonders why. I don't think it's because we're any kinder or gentler than our ancestors. My theory is that the computer revolution has turned out very well because we never really knew what we were doing. Developments have always been different than anyone expected. We never expected personal computers. We never expected the web. We never expected these things because we've never understood what the heck we were getting into with computing machinery. We've always been misled by our preconceptions. We had no idea what computers were 50 years ago, and we rashly called them mechanical brains or thinking machines. In point of fact, we boldly claimed that these machines were thinking when we ourselves didn't know what thinking was. We still don't. Computers have never done any of our thinking, and they've only revealed our vast ignorance about the nature of thinking. Frankly, I firmly believe that human brains rarely do much so-called thinking. We somehow were misled thousands of years ago into believing that real human thinking has something to do with rationality and sequential logic. In point of fact, human brains do this kind of stuff about as often as human feet do ballroom dancing. When human brains are really bubbling along at top capacity, they come up with things like, "My love is like a red, red rose." Now this is the sort of thing that makes no objective sense at all. And yet we all know very well what it means. The human brain is all about ideas and meaning, understanding and perception. Computers are just not about this stuff at all. They founder on this. They founder on that because we build them and we founder on it ourselves. And personally, I blame Aristotle. A very glib and persuasive guy who should never have been trusted by anyone. But in any case, the next 50 years will allow us to clear away a great deal of confused and antiquated thinking about thinking. We will come to real terms with computation. In the next 50 years, we'll stop trying to make computers think, and we'll learn how to make computers really compute. Computation isn't thinking, but it's very interesting. Computation is a refreshingly strange, raw, and deeply stupid process. It has a lot in store for us. Computation has the power to vanish into the deepest textures of our daily lives. Computation is a technology with a strong center and a lot of edges. And what do I mean by this? Well, consider television. The center of television is the technical fact that a cathode ray tube can create visible images from electrical signals. The edge of television is an orange-haired divorcee eating a frozen dinner and watching Wheel of Fortune. The center of internet is the decentralized TCP/IP protocol. The far edge of internet may be a world of digital nomads, all carrying laptops, cell phones, and sat dishes, congregating instantly and fluidly from every corner of the compass, forming vast, colorful, buzzing tent cities of bubble-packed software and string, and then vanishing like the dew. A weird vision, but this is what our physical world would look like if our world somehow adapted the characteristics of modern cyberspace. And is this really happening to us? Maybe so. Here we are at this exposition. We're from all over the place, and we must have some earthly reason to be here. So are you a jet setter logging frequent flyer miles, or are you just a techno gypsy? Can you tell the difference anymore? A lot of people retire into Winnebagos these days. If you're working so hard just to hit the road and enjoy the end of your life, why not cut the process short and leave right now? Settled life was a technical development, too. Settled life was all about a technology called agriculture, about rivers and walls and fertile soil. Maybe 5% of us work in agriculture now. Maybe 5% of us are really tied to the soil. The rest of us are just used to sitting still. If bits really mean more to us than atoms, how many of us will sell off our atoms to live on our bits? Well, I suppose this vision doesn't make much economic sense, but what does? What does economics really mean anymore in an immaterial so-called information economy? a vast hall of funhouse mirror sites, all spiders and firewalls, swarming with search engines and copy devices. We've all been waiting patiently for the commercialization of the web, for a stable business model for the web. But I can't help but notice that the web seems to be growing a lot faster than the economy is. In fact, the web is growing much faster than any economy has in all of history. We think that the internet may choke up and crash, and maybe it will, but we certainly know that economies choke up and crash. So which system is really more brittle? Which is more artificial? Which is more unreal? Is the web becoming an aspect of the economy, or is the economy becoming an aspect of the web? Do we really know what a market is anymore? Do we know what a market might become if many of the major players are automated trading systems rather than human beings? As time creeps on, the edges of internet may spawn strange new para-market entities, truly sophisticated super barter economies, sub-markets, over-markets, non-markets, black markets, gray markets, green markets, hybridized net economies that we have no modern terms for. The way we do business today isn't the natural order. It's not based on holy revelation or bedrock laws of physics. It's just social, political, commercial relationships, far more fluid and vulnerable than we like to admit. Many people have tried to make 20th century commercial sense of computer networks. We've seen them march in and we have seen them stumble. Prestel, Videotex, Cube, Minitel, The Source, eWorld, Prodigy. There will be others. How can there be 40 million people using the internet, a system which supposedly makes no commercial sense? Maybe when there are 400 million people or 4 billion people, then we will be forced to admit that it's our ideas of commerce which are no longer sensible. Networking is permeating the advanced economies now. It's making serious inroads in the developing world. Maybe every human being will have a net address someday soon. But why stop there? It's just getting interesting. I want net addresses, not just for myself, but for my cell phone and my laptop. Don't forget my car, my house, my bicycle, my toaster, my surfboard, my wristwatch, my cat, my dog. I think my cat really needs a cellular phone. I'd love to be able to call that cat and know that he was forced to listen to me for once. I want to know what my cat is up to at all times. And if we're wiring our pets for sound, let's network all the important animals. Livestock, of course, will start with prize racehorses and stud bulls, but if the price of the technology crashes, we'll do them all. Every sheep, every cow, every goat, millions of them. And the wild animals too, of course. We do this already. We have metal leg bands for migrating birds, radio collars for bears and wolves and whales, but that's just a primitive beginning. If we're spending tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars to save the California condor, then let's treat this as a serious business investment. Let's put full-scale 24-hour global tracking and video on those birds. The natural world is a precious resource. As 21st century stewards of the rapidly dwindling natural wilderness, we must do our solemn duty by our friends and clients, the world's wild animals. As a good citizen of 2047, I want the wilderness saturated with media coverage. And why stop with animals? When bandwidth and connectivity become cheap enough, we can saturate the entire surface of the earth. We might invent a new all-purpose global net device, a combination weather station, seismometer, pollution sensor, telephone repeater, mini bank, parking meter, and video audio internet telepresence node all in one. Their time and position would always be known precisely to the last nanosecond and micron. Their entire output of signals and data would be recorded and cataloged in real time, and they would be as common as traffic lights, fence posts, or beer cans. These devices would be especially common where we already have expensive geophysical sensors around volcanoes, on earthquake fault lines, and so forth. But if we're mapping the environmental changes in high-risk areas, why settle for half measures? Why not just map all the environmental changes on the Earth's surface, everywhere, all the time? This would surely pay off in the long run. I suppose that recording the planet's entire surface sounds rather challenging by contemporary technological standards, but the hardware won't be the problem. According to good old Moore's Law, cited by everyone up here, the average computer in 2047 is supposed to be 10 billion times more powerful than the average computer today. 10 billion. That seems like a nice, round, Carl Sagan-style sum to me. Clearly, there's a lot of leeway there. Is having the whole Earth saturated with broadcast computation really any odder than having the whole Earth saturated with bad TV sitcoms? I don't see why, frankly. And having accomplished this, I think that moving our canned media coverage into outer space would be a relatively minor development, something best left to backyard astronomers and other such public-spirited hobbyists. Hauling humans and their life support systems onto the surfaces of other planets is a daunting technical challenge, but saturating the solar system with tiny machines, each one as smart as 10 billion PCs, that sounds like it might be a very pleasant and edifying enterprise in 2047. I'd like to see the moon wrapped in media coverage for our general edification. I'd like to see the sun wrapped in media too. There's not a lot of practical hands-on measures we can take about the sun, I guess. But surely it's in the basic interest of the human race to keep a weather eye out on the basic source of all earthly life. We'd do this sort of thing with our spare time if we were more civilized and thought a little more clearly. Now, computers don't think. They don't have to think, and we can't make them think. But if computation isn't thought, what is it? Well, we'll have a better hands-on understanding of computation by 2047. I don't think that computation has much to do with intelligence, but I suspect it has plenty to do with simulation. Computers are very good at creating toy worlds, models, virtualities, artificial spaces. This is turning out to be an arena where computers can really shine. So what can you do with huge, enormously detailed artificial landscapes that have no intelligence? Keep in mind, there isn't any will or intention here. There's just a blind ability to generate complexity. Also, an equally blind ability to sort the products of that computation. Well, that can be very useful. There is such a thing as a blind, non-intelligent design process. It's called evolution. It's the blind watchmaker. Now, we've seen some halting attempts along this line in computers already, but imagine that times 10 billion. I think it'll be quite some time before a computer is able to fully simulate any living creature, even something as simple as a bacterium. However, I do think we have a pretty good grasp of the grosser laws of large-scale classical mechanical physics. Things on the scale of, say, jackknives and pipe wrenches. So I think that a very powerful mid-21st century computer might be able to fully simulate and evolve simple mechanical objects. Let's say machine tools. So bear with me here. Let's imagine it's 2047 and that you want to design, say, a mechanical jack for a car. There are a surprisingly large number of different kinds of car jacks. So instead of racking our human brains designing more of them, perhaps we should try an entirely new approach. Perhaps we should just grow them inside computers. Here's the scheme. We'll scan all the jacks we have already. We'll input their parameters into this simulated physics inside our simulation supercomputer. They'll be our seed jacks. Then we'll cross-breed them. We'll torture test these simulated machines inside the computer for ruggedness, durability, and the thrifty use of materials. We'll have the machine generating millions of variant car jacks, ruthlessly weeding out all those that fail. At the end of this process, we have our result. We have produced an evolved car jack. It's a device that no human brain could imagine. A car jack that has come from methodically exhausting the entire phase space of all possible car jacks. It might not look like a jack at all. It's probably unrecognizable. But man, can it hold up a car. And all its physical specifications are right there inside our supercomputer. So we just cast them out in steel or plastic, and behold, an evolving simulation from inside a blind and random computer has become a workaday physical object. It's real. It's as real as dirt. You can carry it in your trunk. Now this sounds like we're getting something for nothing. And we are. But didn't we get leopards and walruses that way? I don't remember paying anything to obtain the octopus or the pterodactyl, though I could never have invented them from a standing start. Now, if natural selection works in the real world, then unnatural electronic selection ought to work several billion times faster. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe, just possibly, I'm simply making all this up. Maybe I'm just inventing it for you, because I like to play with ideas. And for a science fiction writer of my generation, your corner of the world is the place to find them. Computing machinery has become a spiritual oasis for the imagination. It is a fountain, a mighty wellspring of crazy ideas. The world 50 years from now may have nothing to do with any of these notions I've discussed for you today, but I can promise you one thing. It will have realities, daily realities, physical, quotidian realities that are absolutely that strange. Probably stranger. Things we can't imagine, things we can't make sense of, things beyond our pale, wonderful things. We can't always make sense. Human beings die from too much sense. Quite often, we're senseless and we're also fearful. We're paranoid and we live in unreasoning dread and prejudice, and our minds are cramped and dark. We are dark and squalid little creatures, and we have huge untapped capacities for malice and wickedness. This is a sordid home truth about us that we hate to admit to ourselves, but we can also survive amazing amounts of surprise and wonder. Maybe that's our saving grace. Sometimes we can overcome our natural grim suspicion and learn to appreciate and enjoy a free lunch. And besides, at the end of the day, what fun is a revolution that can't promise us a free lunch? Do we have time, James? A little time? Do I have time to scold the audience?
I knew I wouldn't know when you'd finished.
Great. Thank you.
But then you did that deliberately. We have time, and I've been worrying about this.
Great. Okay.
So, you want to go on?
I am going to go
Saved. I'll sit. Just
Now,
wave to
ladies
me when
and
it's
gentlemen,
time.
Right. This shouldn't take too long. I know I was supposed to get all dark and moody and vitriolic in this speech, but I was just having too good a time. But, I can't resist this final golden opportunity granted by our host to give you all a good scolding. So I'm going to tell you about the darkest and the most morbid and depressing thing that I have actually seen at this event. Now, this happened during an earlier presentation when our speaker expressed his feeling that the idea of leisure is bogus. He polled the audience, he polled you, he asked us, how many of you can honestly say that you have some leisure? And one single, lonely hand went up. One guy, he said. Well, I'm proud to report that I was that guy, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to break it to you people, but I'm actually here on vacation. I'm not in your industry. This is something I do for fun. It's a hobby of mine. I've got my feet up. I've got a little paper parasol in my drink. Really, I'm slacking off. Now, if I were working all hard and earnestly, I wouldn't be here. I'd be home writing my overdue novel. But instead, I'm here in sunny San Jose, getting away from it all. So you see, leisure is not that hard to find in today's society. I'm not even getting paid for this. It's fun. Now, I know you guys have some leisure. At the very least, you've got plenty of slack time while you're waiting for Windows 95 to shut down. Now go outside and look at those faces, those photographs of the elite people in your own field. Look at that hall of photographs outside that room. You don't see any Scrooges or horrible shriveled up little drudges over there. Those are obviously multi-dimensional human beings with deep creative talent who could take some honest pleasure and satisfaction in their lives. So stop pretending that you drudge and labor every working moment. Shame on you for giving in to that evil lie. Workaholism is not a virtue. It is an affliction. If you don't believe me, ask the people who love you. Now, this is not a rational or productive thing to blow out your wrist tendons on the burnout track, pretending that you never need any leisure. If you have no time to step back and examine yourself, no time to smell the roses, no time to wonder or ponder or daydream, no freedom to become yourself. I don't care what business you are in, you are collaborating in the theft of your own life. This is a dark and immoral thing. You will do yourself an injury. But you can get over this syndrome. Hope beckons. Yes, you are brilliant. Yes, you're very dedicated. Yes, you're producing maybe 40% of the modern American economy. But you're not so deep into this that you'll get the bends if you come up for a little free air. Now, I have every confidence in you people. Just put down the mouse in the snack food bag. Take some tottering steps into the full light of day. Eat an apple, go swimming, have children. Read a novel even. Now just slack off and glory in your slack. And when you're done, you'll see that living is not drudgery any more than this has been drudgery for me. I am here to tell you that I have seen the future and it leisures. End of sermon. Thank you very much.